Building floating shelves. So in this video, I'll be showing you how I made and set up these floating shelves. And I wanted to mention that whoever thought of these is really dang smart and someone who appreciates the aesthetics of woodwork yet still making it functional. You can simply use brackets, which is the most logical and practical design, but someone had the idea to make these look really cool. And I think I really appreciate the idea of these more than the actual finished product. So with that said, let's get started with this project. I had some leftover 2x8 Douglas fir that I'm reusing for this project, so it already had some holes in it. I cut it in half, which was 37.5 inches. I sanded it down and I wanted to match the color of this other piece of reclaimed wood I also had from another project. And so to match the stain, I guess the color would be similar to Ipswich pine with a small amount of darker stain like this provincial one, and I mixed the two together. And I use a satin finish for all my wood projects, and in order to coat all the sides of the wood without worrying about the bottom touching the ground, I found it really helpful to prop my pieces up on some scrap wood. So I put on the finish, and the next part was to cut off a 1.5 inch section off of the shelf to place the dowels in. And I don't have a table saw, but this is a really good idea that I saw in a YouTube video that I referenced in the description to prop up the piece on some scrap wood and clamp it to the table. And you just have to adjust the circular saw blade to go just barely past the depth of the wood to make sure it cuts all the way through. And I took a 1x2 piece that's exactly 1.5 inches thick to mark off the ends. And then I took that 1x2 piece, which would act as a guide for my saw, and made sure the blade met with the line before clamping it down. I measured the distance of the 1x2 to the edge and clamped it down on the other side. Then I would use the guide to get a perfectly cut 1.5 inch piece, but then I forgot that there was an old screw at the very end. Dang. I remeasured it and pretty good, 1.5 inches, and I just repeated the process for the other shelves. I probably should have stained and finished it after I cut it, so I had to restain the parts where it didn't cut so evenly. And here's a side-by-side comparison of the stain I tried to match, and I think it actually looks pretty similar. I moved our couch, and I really hate finding studs. Maybe my stud finder is terrible, or I'm just really that bad at it, but I had to double check with a thin nail that it was actually on the stud. My wife calculated the distance that she wanted between the shelves, and I needed to prep some things before drilling, like deciding which side was up and down, which shelf was on the left or right of the wall, and then I had to mark where it would be drilled into the stud because I had to make sure I don't drill a hole for the dowels in that spot. After that, I measured the distance to the stud and marked it on the back side. Then I clamped the cutoff piece back to the original because the next step was drilling a 3-inch deep hole with a 1/2 inch drill bit into both pieces. And so I had to make sure I didn't make a hole where the mark studs were. And even though the hole and the dowel size should match up exactly, I've always had trouble where the dowel is just too tight. And so again, I learned this ingenious technique from the greatest resource of all time, YouTube, and I referenced the video in the description below, where you use the drill to hold the dowel and smooth it out in the hole. And so I used the measurements made earlier for where to put the shelf and drilled it directly into the studs. I started off with one screw, making sure it was level before screwing in the second one. After that, you just slide in the rest of the shelf, which fit perfectly.
Oh, perfect.
And you can only tell the separation between the two pieces if you look really carefully. Otherwise, if you just looked at it, you probably wouldn't even notice it. And so I just repeated the process for the other shelves.
First one is our engagement photo because chronological order, please. Second, the poem. Wedding one, all of them will get one of these guys. Thanks to Steph. Maybe we should vacuum the couch. Now this is a cozy home. So cute.
This is definitely one of the most fun projects I've had, learning some really insightful skills for the future. I like how clean the shelves look without any obvious hardware, and it makes the wall look so much better. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you like, subscribe if you want to see new content, and we'll see you next time.